Welcome to Good Friday, April 10th, 2020. Welcome to worship with Faith Lutheran Church in Delavan and Jackson Lake Lutheran Church in Amboy. I'm Pastor Todd. Sure glad that you found us here again. I invite you, just a couple of short days from now, we're going to have a wonderful celebration of Easter Sunday. But tonight, as the sun has just set, we're at dusk here, we gather this evening to remember a most somber night. We are gathered on Good Friday. It's the evening of Christ's crucifixion. And so tonight we observe the incredible sacrifice that was given for our sinful humanity as Jesus is crucified on the cross. Our Tenebrae worship this evening, it's a very simple and yet a very somber service, one of scriptures and of hymns. After we hear our opening hymn, we will hear our first passage of God's Word, and we'll have a time of reflection with a hymn, and then extinguish the first of 7 candles on the altar. At the end of our service, with all 7 candles extinguished, the lone Christ candle will be carried from our worship space, and we will hear the loud sound of the stone sealing the tomb. And when the lone Christ candle returns at the end of our service, reminding us of that incredible hope and that promise of what awaits for us on Easter Sunday, we depart in prayerful silence. It's an unfinished ending of a story that has only begun to be told, but it's one which will be boldly proclaimed from the mountaintops on Easter Sunday morning. Thanks be to God.
Matthew 26, verses 20 through 25. When it was evening, he sat at table with the 12 disciples, and as they were eating, he said, "Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me." And they were very sorrowful, and began to say to him one after another, "Is it I, Lord?" He answered, "He who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to the man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born." Judas, who betrayed him, said, "Is it I, Master?" He said to him, "You have said so."
Go to dark Gethsemane, all who feel the tempter's power, your Redeemer's conflict see. Watch with him 100 hour, turn not from his grief away. Learn from Jesus Christ to pray. Follow to the judgment hall. View the Lord of light array. Call the Lord God. All the earth his forces sustain. Shall not suffering shame or loss. Learn from him to bear the cross. Calvary's mournful mountain climb, there adoring at his feet. Mark that miracle time, God's own sacrifice complete. It is finished, hear him cry. Learn from Jesus Christ to die. Early hasten to the tomb, where they laid his breathless grave. All in solitude and gloom, who has taken him away? Christ is risen, he meets our eyes. Savior, teach us so to rise.
Matthew 26, verses 30 through 35. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, "Tonight you will all desert me, for it is written in the Scriptures that God will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have been brought back to life again, I will go to Galilee and meet you there." Peter declared, "If everyone else deserts you, I won't." Jesus told him, "The truth is that this very night, before the cock crows at dawn, you will deny me 3 times.
Jesus, I will ponder now on your holy passion. Let your Spirit
Our reading is from Luke chapter 22, verses 39 through 46. Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. When he rose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked them. "Get up and pray so that you will not fall into temptation." Here ends the reading.
Mark 14:43 through 63. And immediately while he was still speaking, Judas, one of his disciples, arrived with a mob, equipped with swords and clubs, sent out by the chief priests and other Jewish leaders. Judas had told them, "You will know which one to arrest when I go over and greet him. Then you can take him easily." So as soon as they arrived, he walked up to Jesus. "Master," he exclaimed, and embraced him with a great show of friendliness. Then the mob arrested Jesus and held him fast. But someone pulled a sword and slashed at the high priest's servant, cutting off his ear. Jesus asked them, "Am I some dangerous robber that you come like this, armed to the teeth, to capture me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there teaching every day. But these things are happening to fulfill the prophecies about me." Meanwhile, all his disciples had fled. There was, however, a young man following along behind, clothed only in a linen nightshirt. When the mob tried to grab him, he escaped, though his clothes were torn off in pieces, so that he ran away completely naked. Jesus was led to the high priest's home, where all the chief priests and other Jewish leaders soon gathered. Peter followed far behind, and then slipped inside the gates of the high priest's residence, and crouched beside a fire among the servants. Inside, the chief priests and the whole Jewish Supreme Court were trying to find something against Jesus that would be sufficient to condemn him to death, but their efforts were in vain. Many false witnesses volunteered, but they contradicted each other. Finally, some men stood up to lie about him and said, "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days I will build another made without human hands.'" But even then they didn't get their story straight. Then the high priest stood up before the court and asked Jesus, "Do you refuse to answer this charge? What do you have to say for yourself?" To this Jesus made no reply. Then the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of God?" Jesus said, "I am, and you will see me sitting at the right hand of God, and returning to earth in the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore at his clothes and said, "What more do we need? Why wait for witnesses?"
Holy Jesus, how hast thou offended that we do judge thee, and then hate pretend?
Matthew 27, verses 27 through 38. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand and knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spit on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink, mixed with gall. But after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots. And sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him. "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left.
Luke chapter 23, verses 44 through 49. Now it was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour. Then the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was torn in two. And when Jesus cried out with a loud voice, he said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Having said this, he breathed his last. So when the centurion saw what had happened, he glorified God, saying, Certainly this was a righteous man. And when the whole crowd came together to that sight, seeing what had been done, beat their breasts and returned. But all his acquaintances, and the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance, watching these things.
Now scornfully surround
John 19, verses 38 through 42. After this, Joseph, who was from a town of Arimathea, asked Pilate if he could take Jesus' body. Pilate told him he could have the body. So Joseph went to take it away. Nicodemus, who had first gone to see Jesus at night, went with Joseph, taking with him about 100 pounds of spices, a mixture of myrrh and aloes. The two men took Jesus' body and wrapped it in linen cloths, with the spices according to the Jewish customs of preparing a body for burial. There was a garden in the place where Jesus had been put to death. In it there were a tomb where no one had ever been buried. Since it was the day before the Sabbath, and because the tomb was close by, they placed Jesus' body there.